kunathina singaba sekhaya masukhuluma emsamo awufuni umuntu ozongena zolanda ukhuluma kanjani okhokho bakho. So I thought I should just make that point, comrade, particularly because we said kuyoba khona nemibuzo nayo ningahlupheki ngiyoyilalela nje ngiyowazi umbuzo ophendulwayo nongaphendulwa. Having said that, comrades, I must thank you very much for organizing this political interaction. One of the character of the ANC is political discussion. It is very rare that you can develop politically sufficiently without interaction and discussions. It is very rare that you can be a politician, no matter at what level, that you can know everything. Once you believe you know everything, you must know there is something wrong with you. Ngoba uyena uNkulunkulu owazi konke. You must always be ready to learn as you are ready to help others to be empowered and developed. I'm very excited that in the main, this interaction today has been organized by the ANC Youth League. Because that's where we need to do more in helping our young people to appreciate politics, the country, the continent, and the world, politically. That's why CSCT, the ANC Youth League, kulapho ukufukanyelwa khona intsha, kulapho efunda khona, lapho efundiswa khona. And it is important for us to appreciate that fact because it is an important fact. The politics, to those I heard you, Kuruma, UJ, to those who are somewhere in UJ, they will tell you it's one of the scientific branch in life. Science, politics is science as well. Am I right? Siyaphumelana. Sekuthi ngibuza umbuzo wesibili. Sale kancane kangaka. Ngizoyibuza njalo yami ngizothi ngizobuza mina nje. Ngizobuza nini? So I wanted to thank the ANC Youth League, but also appreciate that you opened up for comrades. Nabasuke usinga emakhaya. Nabo beza nje nangasho ukuthi asifuni intsha thini. Asifuni intsha bese sesithanda ukuthi muhlamba insiphi nasuku. It's very important because political discussion is a healthy exercise to a movement like ANC. Because we can clarify issues among ourselves and help ourselves to develop and to be empowered. And that should be the objective. No other objective. Not that I need to be better than Omunyimuntu. All members of the ANC, they are lingana. If you are given a responsibility, we are just given a responsibility, not because we are better than others. Because one position can't be held by many people. But as I will touch something here, which is important, I will hope that we appreciate ukuthi ipolitiki ibaluleke kanjani. Because ngithe politics science nangivumela, so kuzomnye umbuzo later. Comrade Director of the program, allow me first and foremost to thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on the role of the ANC Youth League during this period in the history of our organization. In other words, even if I talk about other processes at other times, but we are focusing on this process, this period. Maybe by the time we get there, we would have understood why we are saying so, because each period has its own challenges. Challenges are not the same. I emphasize this period because our discussions must focus on the concrete application of our theories and principles. The organization that has no theory, that also has no principles, is like a dead organization. Theory, it means knowledge. If you have an organization, you have no knowledge, politically and otherwise, as to what is happening, and you have no discipline, then uzobonakala. The generation of pigs like Isaac Seme and his peers crafted their mission and succeeded to implement it to its fulfillment. And it is always good to mention pigs like Isaac Seme, because when pigs like Isaac Seme took the leadership position, not as a president, as a South African, a young South African, because he was very young, as a young South African, he did not care where he was. He did not care that there were older people than him. He came to realize that we were oppressed, we were colonized, together with others, and started.
And that's the former President Jacob Zuma speaking tonight in Johannesburg at an...
He finally wrote his famous essay, I'm an African. And I always say to comrades, it's always good to find that essay and read it. How broad he was in terms of understanding the African problems, and how hopeful he was that in fact we can resolve our problems, and began to engage. He was one of those who worked very hard together with his peers to ensure that something was done. What was the problem? The problem was that South Africa had been colonized fully. If you take from the time of arrival of Jan van Riebeeck I know that if I say so, some people are tinted. But it is a fact. That's when our problems began. And you can't hide it. There was a process. There was a process of colonizing South Africa, which took a long time, many wars, ending up with South Africa divided into 4 republics. The Cape, the Free State, Transvaal, and Natal. When that time came, it meant that South Africa was colonized. Our land was taken. The English were in charge, finally, of the 2 republics. The Afrikaners were in charge of 2 republics. They would have stayed, probably. We would have ended up with 4 countries. Yes, possible. We would have ended up if these just stayed as they were. Then there was a discovery of mineral resources, which caused the British to say the Afrikaners cannot hold these republics. We must annex them. And there was a war which ended up with, of course, the Afrikaners being defeated, but they all agreed that let us be together, have one country, let us unite the republics. And they called South Africa the Union of South Africa. So, one country. It is during this time that many began to say, we can't sit and just look at ourselves being colonized. Particularly because in the discussions between the English-speaking and Afrikaans-speaking, they agreed on one thing, that in this country we are forming, it is our country, white people. The blacks must not be party, except they will live in it, under our control. We will not allow them to participate in our parliament. We will not allow them to vote. We are not going to give them any land. This is what made people of this period, Abo Pixteka Izagaseme, to say, how could we allow this? Maybe to organize is not an easy matter, but they decided to stand up and say, let us organize. And began to organize one first conference that established the African National Congress. That movement of colonization had affected all of us in Southern Africa. Lesotho, Botswana, Swaziland. In other words, we were faced with a problem, a disaster, a calamity. Angazi ukuthi abafundile basebenzisa amaphi amagama azwakalayo. That is a period on which the destiny of a black man in South Africa was decided. That we are going to live in poverty. We are going to be unequal to others. We are going to be just a mess which is not working, unemployment. That time made the future of a black man ingabonakali. Since that time, it has never come right since then. Poverty that we did not know visited us. Inequality, certainly, we were not equal to others. It's a serious matter. That is why people like Pixley were saying, in no way can we sit and wait to starve to death. It was after many wars, and people know this a great deal. But I'm raising this issue because I want us to be clear today. Today, when did our problem start? And who was responsible for that? And therefore, having looked at all of that, decide what needs to be done to correct that situation. I want to say, whatever I'm going to say, bear this in mind. This must be your anchor point. That we have a problem that has never been resolved in this country. I don't know which generation will resolve it. Their legacy, the legacy of Pixley Zagaseme and his colleagues, lives on in the African National Congress, the premier African National Liberation Movement. And for the last 25 years, this liberation movement has been the governing party in the Republic of South Africa. In the last 20 years, this organization that was formed by these very bright and brave people, which has liberated us, it has been in government for 25 years. When I said that generation succeeded to have a mission and accomplished it, well, they decided to form a national organization called the African National Congress as an instrument to liberate and decolonize the country, and worked hard for that, and said things that are still relevant today. In other words, we're the generation that emerged when there was no organization, there was nothing. And understood that we needed to organize ourselves through an organization. They mobilized everybody, including Amakosi and kings and everybody, and built an organization that is still ongoing today and going stronger. And an organization that, if we handle it with care, is going to live for another century, unless we fail as this generation. And unless we are not looking at the problems direct, we are looking aside. Siyawaziba ama-problems. Ngoba sisaba ukuthi abantu abaphetheyo inhliziyo zabo zizoba buhlungu, nabanomhlaba inhliziyo zabo zizoba buhlungu masuthatha. The generation of Oliver Tambo, A.P. Mda, Nelson Mandela, Anton Lembede, and Walter Sisulu created the ANC Youth League that has brought us all together during our bitter struggle and during the period of our freedom and democracy. That generation went on to provide leadership of the National Liberation Movement until the political settlement that brought about the democracy we enjoy today. That's the generation. It was the second generation that emerged. This generation emerged because the ANC that was established by another generation had been living for quite some time. From 1912, when this movement came, it was about 1930-something when the thinking began to say, it looks like our movement is stagnating. It's not moving the way we want. And began to feel we need something. We need something to help it. And the ANC itself, the leadership that was there, realized this and felt that we have not harnessed the energy, the imagination of our youth so that they participate in a very specific way. We therefore need to establish the ANC Youth League, which must be an instrument in itself as a small organization, but big, that is going to look at these issues, imagine, do things without fear, as the youth would do. And it is absolutely important to appreciate that in whatever you do, you need a vehicle. Whilst there was this huge vehicle, which had been there for a number of years, early 40s, the ANC Youth League was indeed established to allow the youth to imagine, to have a mission, to look forward to fulfill a mission. The ANC Youth League was specifically established to bring militancy, not just in action, but in mind, thinking, dreaming. Being able to see a free South Africa there and say, how do we get there? And indeed, they did their part. They did their part. You will agree with me that few of them reached the first destination. They reached 1994. In other words, this organization that was established by the first generation, and it was so successful, you had others who added something in the middle and said, let us put more wings to this big one to fly. And indeed, they were there. In the campaigns that they made going forward, you'll realize that they had a mission, and you can be safe if you say they also accomplished their mission. Oliver Tambo was just left with a very short time to reach the final destination. Madiba did, and few others. You can write a history of South Africa. You'll never forget to talk about the period. Yabo Isaka Sen, Yabo Mahak. There's a period, if you write your history, we are not going to forget that there was Tambos and Mandelas. And indeed, one of them became the first president of a democratic South Africa. Only after they delivered something, they agreed to the call to leave us and go somewhere where we'll find them one day. And I'm saying this because at times when people are nice and heavy, whatever, you hear criticizing Mandela, saying Mandela sold out, when we are selling out. Mandela fought and fought hard. One of the long-serving prisoners who never changed, no matter how painful it was, until he delivered South Africa politically. Our freedom, if you go to deeper politics, we are at what revolutionaries call liberated zone. Not free in our country. We are not. We are in a liberated zone. Because if we're free, we will not be living in informal settlements. And I can count more things if we're free, unless I don't understand English because I never went to school. What freedom means. I just want to make that point because in a struggle, you get a liberated zone and you proceed to finally liberate the country. Madiba gave us a liberated zone, gave us instruments to use. We are not using them. Even if we have 2/3 majority, we just look at it. As not as understand the 1%. Comrades, there were a number of generations during this time, including the young women and men who joined the first unit of Umkhonto weSizwe. We had the generation that led the revival of youth and students organizations, as well as the young lions of the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. They all played a critical role in the struggle for our liberation. At all these periods, the youth has been always an important core to take the struggle forward. As our struggle intensified, it brought to the fore different forms of struggle, including mass demonstrations and marches, international mobilization and armed struggle. The banning of political organizations also meant that many of the activities had to be organized in conditions of illegality, which necessitated the creation of underground structures and other methods of struggle. And again, young people were in the forefront. It may be useful, comrades, to anchor the discussion on the mandate of the ANC Youth League as envisaged by the mother body. Rule 7.4 in the Constitution of the ANC, it says, among other things, the ANC's objectives are to unite and lead young men and women in confronting and dealing with the problems that face the youth, and to ensure that the youth make a full and rich contribution to the work of the ANC and the life of the nation. Close quote. For the sake of completeness, it is helpful to read the above rule with the aims and objectives of the ANC as set out in Rule 2. Just allow me to underline this one as well. Because I said earlier, if there is no clarity, you can be in a bus with many people. If you don't know where we are going and what is it that you are in, you might even pass your bus stop. Now at the end, there are principal things that you cannot run away from, no matter how you can be smart. Rule 2.2 states that one of the aims and objectives of the ANC is, and I quote, to end apartheid in all its forms and transform South Africa as rapidly as possible into a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic country based on the principles of the Freedom Charter and in pursuit of the National Democratic Revolution. Close quote. Now, I'm doing this because, as I said, I want us to be always alert. I'm sure you will agree with me that there are many discussions we have, workshops, etc. Perhaps at times finish them without quoting the policy documents. True. We've got new ideas, always, because we are bright. Without saying, konje la kuthiwa, we even make it difficult to implement the policies we have, because we've got other ideas in our heads. It's absolutely important. It's absolutely important to be like those old ones who were younger at their time, to know exactly what is our mission. What must we do to fulfill the mission? They were fighting at a more difficult time because they were fighting the white government, who was very ruthless, kept them in jail, sent them out of the country, etc. And we said we are fighting to get our freedom. And we got it. That's what we think. That we got it. We must qualify. We got our political freedom. That says many other things. We are not free. If you say so, I disagree. Me, I disagree. Because if we were free, we'd be part of the bigger economy of this country. If we were free. If we were free, there would be no people like us who look like us, who stay in the informal settlement. If we're free, we would take all the resources to remove that kind of situation. The Youth League, of course, has its own constitution. It is an autonomous body within the overall structure of the ANC. Its constitution elaborates on its aims and objectives. I'm sure that every member of the League makes sure to understand the two constitutions very well. I was suspicious at one point because when we said you are autonomous, but relative, it's relative, it's not absolute. That's why we say in a broader ANC. Ukhona abanye abasebefuna my part. Yes, this card. Because we are ANC. We are ANC machinery, huge machinery. Women's League, everybody. Comrades, the youth of today face different problems than the youth of the past. Therefore, the ANC Youth League of the current period must actively unite young people to confront and deal with the problems of today. That's the task of the ANC Youth League. Some conventional view frames the problem as a triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. But equally important is to bear in mind that these triple challenges are a direct product of colonialism and apartheid, and are among many more. These challenges impact greatly on the accomplishment of one of the most critical tasks of the youth, which is to learn and what to learn and how to learn. We simplify our problems, and I'll try to explain this. Uyabona sithi no, inequality, unemployment, uyabona nje sesidlulile njalo. The question is whether, from the viewpoint of the youth, these challenges are framed correctly. But even more importantly, whether the right measures are being taken to deal with them. I think comrade here was touching an important point. Free education. Free education. Oh. Wanda msebenzi mali yodwa ngekho. Kasuthu ngibeka kanjani lesuthu? Wanda msebenzi mali yodwa ngekho. Akasazi. No, I was asking him, how do you put that phrase in Sesotho? Wanda msebenzi mali yodwa ngekho. Eh? Eh? No. Okay. But
ya tamisebenzi cheleta hiyo.
Hayi. Angisizwa kahle. Yeah, tamisebenzi. Cheleta hiyo.
Direct translation. Direct translation.
Okay, eh? Just repeat. Mushumo watini.
Ngoba ubhala chelete. Direct translation.
Okay. Usamele. Recall that the founders of the ANC Youth League, in a similar situation of stagnation in the movement, developed developed a campaign in 1949 when they developed the program of action and took steps to ensure that it would be implemented. One of those steps was to make it clear that it will only support a candidate for a leader, for the presidency of the ANC, who undertook to implement the program of action. And that is what they did. Recall that the founders of the ANC Youth League, in a similar situation of stagnation in the movement, developed a campaign, the 1949 program of action, and took steps to ensure that it would be implemented. One of those steps was to make it clear, as a youth league, they made it clear to the ANC that it would only support a candidate for the leadership of the ANC who undertook to implement the program of action. And that is what they did. That's what they did. In other words, the Youth League of Tambo Mandela Sulu, realizing that the organization was in trouble, was not moving, there was no movement. The question of freedom was almost just there. When they were going to a mother bodies conference to which they were already members, they said, we are going to support a leader who would undertake with us to implement the program of action. I don't know whether you see the difference here. What is happening? They did not say, we are just going to look at the leaders. They, at that time, they didn't think they qualified to have a president among them. We still had the leaders that they would look at very clearly. But said, for us to achieve our policies and objectives, we can no longer continue with the president then if he does not agree with the program of action. We will take whoever embraces it. Do you realize that the reason, maybe let me just go further so that the point is properly clarified. This is one of the lessons we need to learn. kulungile. In other words, they were looking at the political program of the Congress. They were looking at what is it that we want to achieve. They were not looking at the leaders, that I like this one, I don't like this one, I like this one. No. They were saying, we have a program to liberate ourselves. The leader that you are going to put in that position is a leader who must be agreeing with what has been agreed by the organization. In other words, they did not act in the manner that will be very fertile for factions. Okay? They did not have also and so, abantu bamla, abantu bamla. No, they did not allow. And they're very clear. They went to fetch Udogotela Morocco. Ehlezi ekhaya, because they knew he supports that program. A very important president, at the time, but sorry, Mdala. I just wanted you to see this. If you have a mission, a clear, you know what you are looking for. You cannot be puzzled by a sweet language, that's all. You will be listening to what Zuma is saying about the program of the African National Congress. The 53 National Conference of the ANC took the view that the national program thus far was not addressing the fundamental elements of the apartheid and colonial system. It resolved to embark on the second and more radical phase of the transition to the National Democratic Society. The difficulty, of course, is that the more talk of radical transformation provokes extreme reaction from the investors, forcing some in the governing party to tone down on the radical transformation program. In other words, what we have all agreed in the highest level of the authority of the ANC, the conference of the branches, we find ways and means of toning down those resolutions. What the youth of Tambo and Mandela did was not to allow that. Not to allow that. Much as Truman was very important, he actually opened a space for the youth in the ANC, and they loved him. But when it came to principles and policies, they said, sorry. Sorry, Mdala. We mean business here. Comrades have suggested that the illusory control of state power may have lulled us into thinking that the government shall deliver everything. State power, if you don't know what you are doing, is as dangerous as having no state power. We would agree that government has delivered a great deal, but the fundamental elements of national oppression continue to stare us in the face. The question arises whether we fully understand the meaning of political power and how we should wield it to destroy all vestiges of colonial rule. If you are free, you have power. Use it to bring full freedom. Destroy all the evil of the past. Destroy it. Now, if you are in the business of going to negotiate with those who control the evil, to say but no. We are going to bring disaster. You know? Iran is the Shona Pans. As the youth, you need to be as clear as anything. That has been the culture of the African National Congress. Clear youth, and nobody must stand in nowhere. You know, if I just take your subject, my good sister, of education, it can't be us who don't know what to do to make free education a reality. Can't be. It can't be. Because we are looking down upon the Freedom Charter that says education must be free and compulsory. If you're a leader of the ANC, you now have power. You can't do so. You can't say whatever happens. You know, we have not, for an example, in my view, my simple view, we have not decolonized education. Let alone to make it free, so that we reduce the number of people who are not skilled in order to grow the economy. Because more time when I joined my school, unginikeza izinto eziningi inobola leshanga inqindi kanti yayibona ndaba iphula imshini, because you need Africans who are skilled, and this is an opportunity. Something to suggest later, but what do I think you guys should do? Ngelinye ilanga ngithi angangona kusemncane bengake ngihlanye nje South Africa. Uyahlanya kanti kulungisa izinto. Allow me to underline that the objective of the ANC Youth League is to unite and empower young people politically so that they are able to confront and deal with the problems they face. Can we say with confidence that as the ANC Youth League, we are doing enough to unite and empower young people? Or are we consumed by internal organizational challenges and leadership contests? What is it that we are doing? You know, when you see the life of the youth is when there's conference coming. Then there is life, there's fast. If there's no conference, dead. Akunjalo? Can we change from there? It doesn't mean that you should hold a position in the ANC Youth League to make a difference. You can make it with no position. If the answer to the last question is yes, then we must understand that someone else will be uniting and leading the young people, and that it may not be the implementation, or it may not implement, especially the economic clauses of the Freedom Charter, and to pursue the National Democratic Revolution. If we don't, in other words, work among the youth, some other people will do it. And they will have different interests. And they will say to the youth, come here, there's a radical economic transformation, and do some other radical economic transformation, not the one you are looking for. You must understand that somebody else is setting the tempo of radical socio-economic transformation, and that program may not be to transform and advance South Africa as rapidly as possible. In fact, it might be a diversion from the real cause of our people. As you know, President A.B. Zuma played a critical role in establishing, in stabilizing and reinvigorating an ANC Youth League in the 1940s. By all accounts, he was an outstanding leader and dedicated to national freedom. He worked hard to develop himself and acquired critical leadership skills. He was also able to spot young talent and nurtured them. Without pressing the point, however, it must be said that the youth leagues or the youth leaguers were not able to persuade him on what they believed was the most radical road to freedom. Having failed to persuade him, instead, Dr. James Morocco was fetched from his home to be elected President General in a new executive with prominent youth leaders or youth leaders. I'm not sure whether you see this. The youth says Dr. Zuma is now blocking us. We fetch someone. But let us get to the National Executive Committee so that we are able to be part of implementing the program. They did not make noise. They did not talk about quotas and everything. Yes. I'm merely making a very clear scientific point It is not the numbers that count. It is the work that you do. If you do the correct work, that makes you even to be above the quotas. This is what the Mandelas did. So there was not even a debate, are they now fit for it or not? They walked there, working, providing leadership. Phela sisodwa la. Masibantu sokhuluma ngequota ngenivumele futhi. Samba singahlukana ngeenamba. The critical point is that we should understand it is us clear with our vision, with our program, that will make thina sibadala sindedele hayi qhubekani sithembe. When this particular generation came into existence, akekho who doubted them. When they had to implement the program of action, Nelson Mandela was one of the authors, was made the commander-in-chief. They had confidence in him, they knew. And he indeed led the Defiance campaign. There's no kind of thing. Very soon, that generation, Utam was the Secretary General of the ANC. Usul, they were all well-filled positions because the country, the organization, was now saying these have matured. They wrote a document and came to present for the ANC to adopt, and the ANC could not fail to adopt the document because it was well written. In other words, like the first generation, they had their mission clear. They knew where they are going and what needed to be done. And they wanted to be there to ensure that it is done. What was clear in the approach in the ANC Youth League was to be part of the key decision-making structures of the ANC, starting from the ANC National Executive Committee, and in this instance, succeeded to put some prominent members of the Youth League there. Nobody could say no. Dawa also shoganjani no. Good. Mauti no oba nabazohamba phambili. So it was not the issue of saying no. Ngimthandi lo. Oh kanjani. It was a question of them having worked hard to ensure that they win the confidence of the elder people. For old people to say they are now indeed qualified to lead the organization. Absolutely critical. The Youth League did that. In other words, it did not talk to deepen its influence in the ANC. In other words, it felt that to extend its influence, the ANC Youth League activists should lead in campaigns and programs to help the mother body to correct tendencies that might lead to stagnation or division from the political programs. Whereas, if Kutobia Shisa, they must be there. They must be the ones moving forward. So that automatically, nobody's going to say you can't be a leader when they were not there, when they were there. No, I'm using my English. When they were not there, when they were there. In other words, labo abayouth, they were there. Labo bangayouth, they were not there. That's what it means. Don't worry about adjectives. The same applies with regard to economic ventures that young people initiate. ANC Youth League activists with the requisite skills should take the lead in the leveraging government programs, but also in organic ventures. They must also be part of the leading activists towards the fulfillment of the radical economic transformation. Now, we need to do something more than talking about radical economic transformation. I'm expecting you to sit down and produce a document. How can it be implemented? What are things you need to do? A document that is going to be radical. It must come from you. It must. You are capable of doing so. If Aboseme produce a document, a radical, or Mandela produce a document, a radical, so that we don't talk. You know, when we went to Mangaung, that's when we went with a recommendation about radical economic transformation. After the conference by the parts, Sapi, saya bukan conference in Kota Jeng, dah udah bersih. We went there. Not so. As khulumi ngayo manje. Ayisezwakala. Ithiwa nje kancane ikwambi ikhohlisa ukuthi sayiphethe ndalo bafana bonke. Ayishila. One of the most critical problems facing the young people today is that of obtaining an education that empowers them to fulfill their mission in society at the current juncture. In other words, the issue of education, comrades, must not be the issue just we touch in passing. I think we should be a pain, like a thorn in the flesh, to demand that education must get attention. There are in fact programs we can cancel. Take that money, bring it to education. Some of your peers are in departments and everywhere. Why not come together on this issue? This is a critical issue. Any country that does not invest in education, it takes a long time for that country to develop above the line of poverty. Any country that invests in education, there are evidence that you can give Singapore is a small country, but everybody goes there because they emphasize on education. They are innovative. They can do anything. Everybody wants to go to Singapore. Small countries. We are a country with everything we need. But we are stupid. You know why other thing I think education is absolutely crucial. I've got a problem, by the way. Ngithi abantu abaya esikoleni yini le efike ibaluthe kancane. Mina ngihamba esikoleni, ngafunda ngaphandle kwesikole. As a result, angimesabi umlungu. Yilenza abasaba belungu abantu abafundile. Abeni ngikhohlele. Abasaba. Let me tell you a simple thing that I always say. Europe one time took a decision to say, we are now going to Africa. We must not fight about Africa. And they organized a conference that took a year to discuss how are they going to divide Africa among themselves without us. Okay? They came, Baba Konama colonies. We started fighting because Bastin Desel, but the critical point is that conference, I'm sure it was an illegal conference, very illegal, to discuss people without them and take a decision that enslaved them forever up to this day. It's illegal. Now in Africa we've got professors, doctors, everything we can think of. What is difficult in us to meet in the AU and take a resolution to nullify that resolution? What is difficult? Let me. What is difficult? Say Saba Abelu. That's all. That thing is illegal, but was paternal. They used to have company laws that added to colonialism. What's a problem to nullify all of that in our country? Sit more fully the money, you'll talk to us. We'll sell it to you. What's the problem? We are born again, I'm going solid. Yabona umuntu masefundiswe bese faka eboxini ukuthi ehamba straight ungabheki. The watchword is the decolonization of education. Education needs to be decolonized. That must be one of your struggles as an ANC youth leader. This was one of the key demands of hashtag Christmas4 movement. This was one of their key demands. Where has it gone to? Together with free education, it is a strategic objective. Free higher education, it is the strategic objective that requires urgent attention. It can be counted as part of the mission of the post-1994 young generation. Ukuba bengimsemhlawumbe bengizoyibhala le tshela ukuthi uyabona ke manje kuzochithe kubaba. Anwazi kubaba la lokuze eGauteng. And I think it is absolutely important that we work on that. Comrades, I've delayed you a long time. It's because I haven't seen you for a long time. You've done that. And the same also applies to shoring up the structures and programs of the progressive trade union movement, COSATU, as well as the community-based South African national civic organizations. Our organizations have almost disappeared. That vibrancy, the COSATU, what has happened? Where are the young workers? One of the critical problems facing the young people today is that of obtaining education that empowers them to fulfill their mission in society at the current juncture. It's absolutely important. Bese ngiyishilo. Kodwa ngiphinda ngamabomu, because education is the key. Bondelela abanye abafana bakweminye imizi. The voice of the League must be heard loud and clear on these matters. The ANC depends more on the youth as a motive force of the National Democratic Revolution. In the words of the strategy and tactics, this is what it says, and I quote, "The tonic of youth resides in their capacity to be a lighting rod for positive change. Their impatience, militancy, and imprudence are a disadvantage if improperly deployed. But these attributes can also stand transforming societies in good state, especially during moments of inertia and excessive risk aversion. They are expected to lend militancy to the various sides of struggle, but to do so in a meaningful way, they need to arm themselves with theoretical knowledge about strategy and tactics of fundamental transformation to eschew arrogance and to learn by doing. It is also critical to counter extreme right and left-wing populist mobilization among the youth. Unquote. By the way, you said politics is science. You said so. What is science? that politic is. Huh? What is side that politic is? I'm coming back to the question. I want the question to be answered. I would want to underline the following points on the role of the ANC Youth League today. Firstly, it is to develop deep understanding of the strategy and tactics of fundamental transformation of society and to impart this knowledge to young people at large. Secondly, it is to develop deep understanding of the fundamental problems facing society in general and young people in particular, and to design ways to address these problems as rapidly as possible. In other words, produce a document. How do you deal with these matters? Thirdly, it is to organize, mobilize, and by example, to lead young people at local, provincial, and national level, to take an active part in confronting and dealing with the problems facing young people and society generally. Fourthly, it is to take an active and creative role in mobilizing all society to tackle the immediate problems such as substance abuse, healthy living, domestic and gender-based violence, and the scourge of crime. Lastly, it is to learn and develop the skills critical to socio-economic development, including the technical skills required in the modern economy. By carrying out just some of these tasks, the current generations of youth, of young people, will, in the famous words of Fanon, fulfill their mission. Let us follow in the footsteps of the founders of the ANC Youth League in 1944. Let us recapture the spirit of the volunteers of the Defiance Campaign of 1952. Let us revitalize the spirit of the soldiers of Mkondo Wesizwe. Let us find inspiration in the exploits of the young lions of the 1980s and 1990s. Let us defend the gains of national liberation struggle and take the lead in building the future outlined in the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. In other words, let us not try to build a South Africa outside of that presented by the Freedom Charter. Let us do just that. It's as simple as that. Comrades, I've taken a lot of your time. As I said, because we don't meet all the time. If we meet all the time, I would have stayed in a very small portion but have a bigger discussion. It is important that we who are now matured, I don't want to use the word old, I'm not old, I'm just matured. That when we look at the ANC, no matter the problems, but we say, This is just for the time being. These guys will fix it. ANC in its history, and that is part of its strength, has come across problems. One of its strengths is to come out of problems and solve them. And you will be mad if you say there will be no problems in the ANC. Otherwise, it will mean there is no life in the ANC. If there is life, there will be ups and downs. That's what it is. What will help you is to know the word, know the ANC, and know how to handle problems. And take a comrade as a comrade. We can talk about many other things. I'm reserving this question for next time. Unless it's not already open.
What is science?
You ready? Somebody must tell me what is science. Huh? No, then we ready. Tell me. What is science? So instead of asking the question, I'm asking the question. But somebody must answer. Huh? Ukona. Answer. Director of the program, thank you very much for the opportunity. I just touched issues. I did not go deeper. We are born and this material in front of me.
President, I think it would be Amanda. Let's be very mindful of time. Since they've said before the topic high discipline. Thank you very much, comrade. Let us, comrade, welcome comrade Carl Neers is in the house, and NEC member of MKFA. Let's allow the commander to greet our people.
Amandla! Viva ANC, viva! Viva Contour Ceasefire Military Veterans Association, viva! Viva Comrade President Jacob Zuma, viva! Comrades, I'm not going to make a speech because protocol says that when the President had spoken, he had spoken. I just want to apologize that I arrived late, Comrade President. Unfortunately, I spent my time this afternoon and early evening at the police station because I had to lay a charge against people who put messages on Twitter threatening to kill me and threatening my family. We must never allow ourselves to be intimidated, comrades. We must always stay strong, and we must always remain committed to the basic principles of freedom, of the Freedom Charter, and full economic liberation. One of the best examples that we have of that principle is in Comrade Jacob Zuma himself. Thank you, comrade.
Amanda! Defender, MKFA, defender! Thank you very much, comrade. What you are going to do? I'm going to steal the amount of strategic. I think the president will tell you. So I've never seen God take a comrade. So I'm going to go to take 4 hands. Those 4 hands are going time, comrade. Remember, if we are dead, you are wasting time. So I'm going to take 4 and comrades 1 minute each. Yeah? So that means that it's 4 minutes. 4 comrades, 4 minutes. So your questions are going to be precise, comrades. Yeah? High discipline. High discipline. All right. Leadership put the jacket, leather jacket at the back. Comrades, why not? Let's be. Where are comrades females? Let's mix it. Comrades females. Comrades females. At the back there, it's going to be you, number 2. Number 3 leaders. I'm going to give you leadership, young person, you yourself, you are number 3. The last one, Saidiki Bobo. This is our Majano, okay, that's what I'm going let's make it, let's behave, let's behave.
It was the base, but
it was the base.
It was the base. I saw that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, comrades. As we've been told, I intend to be brief. First, Ngekaba Musandi Dewagamobo, member of the ANCYL, Greater Johannesburg Zone 9. Right, so the question is very simple. First, before my president, thank you for the presentation you have given us. As we all know, the African National Congress has never met, not even once, and decided that it is abandoning what we are calling the National Democratic Revolution. However, there's a lot of literature, unofficial literature, not of the ANC, but by independent authors, plenty of books, whereby the NDR has been described as a stumbling block towards liberation and freedom. So the question therefore that one will ask you is very simple. What therefore becomes our role as African National Congress, Youth League in particular, to make sure that we go back to basics and continue with the advancement of the National Democratic Revolution? That's the only question. Thank you.
Amanda, over 2. Comrades, my name is Tembeni Manana. I come from Zone 13, Greater Alexandra in Johannesburg. Comrade President, would first want to acknowledge the fact that the existence of young people is there precisely to constructively critique the existence of the ANC and the programs that they actually want to play moving forward. So the question comes to, why does the ANC find it so difficult to actually put into place their own policy positions and resolutions that they take as part of the DNA of the government's operation and what they want to ultimately achieve? And secondly, I'd want to find out if there was a direct political plan for the ANC to continuously conscientize society. Because currently you think that the ANC enjoys having a mass that's not conscious, not understanding their own struggles moving forward. Because we find ourselves in a situation where the old are speaking for the young, men are speaking for women, the disadvantaged are spoken for by the advantaged. So we want to understand the stability of the existence of the ANC within society and their direct interest of actually growing us. What was their direct continuity plan to make sure that the existence that made the ANC to be there are still moving on, moving forward? Because sometimes you swear that our own leaders read the objectives of our existence as a people upside down. Because we try so hard. We try so hard. We question them on a daily. We ask them, what are you saying about the direct economic liberation of black people? Until today, they will tell us about dreams and imaginations that we are already imagined. We're already dreaming. We are ready to take the plan forward. But why is it the ANC becomes the direct rate taking of our existence? Thank you.
My name is Margaret Tandy, in South State. And now this education is like if he already or what? Because it's a Free State again more Southwest College. Okay, my fees. I pay my own fees. I'm doing education. So education in South Africa is over free. So President because right now can drop out because I cannot tell you they will my fees. So that's it. Thank you.
My name is Tabang Bonami. I come from 122 Bekemusaka branch. My zone is zone 3. I'd like to ask you one question only. Just one question. Ini socialist.
Take foreheads. And the highest form of discipline dictates that it remains foreheads. So it would be ill-disciplined to go forward. But when it comes again, he's going to give us a time to discuss, open the discussion. So, comrades, please, let's allow the president to respond to these questions.
Okay, camaradas. Camarada. Comrades, ukuba bokuya nami bengeke ngiyiphendule le mbuzo. Why? Because in my presentation I touched all of them. What I would have said, this is now the job of the ANC Youth League, to sit down how to handle these matters, including the leadership that says things against the policy. Because I've said so. What else must I say? The only question is the song, which I did not deal with, the socialism. That's the only thing I didn't deal with. The comrade was a free state. We dealt with free education and the problems that we are failing to implement even the Freedom Charter policy. So all of that, my view would be, you should be saying, are there issues in this presentation that you would want to take forward? And consolidate, what do you present firstly to your own organization? We are going to the NGC next year. As the youth, you should be saying, here is an opportunity. Let us compile our presentation as the ANC Youth League on this matter in that gathering of the branches. That's what I would be saying. And in addition, I would be saying, this is our mission. Because whilst presenting those, I think it is important for you to say, this is what we are proposing should be done. And there should be a resolution on how we implement ANC policy. And why we should not, when we come out of the ANC conference, say something different. This is what you should do. That's what I would really suggest, rather than starting to answer the questions again. I'm almost going to repeat what I was saying. So that's my point. And perhaps come back to my question, because if politics is science, we must be like the old youth leaguers who are very scientific about where to go. When they wrote, for an example, the program of action, they took it up to the possible guerrilla warfare. They had stages, what needed to be done. And that's what changed the ANC to be more revolutionary. I think that's a task we have got to take. If you want me to come one day to discuss other issues, or even deal with these issues in some details without our friends, because if you notice today, I was very cautious that we've got friends here, very nice friends, that we need to handle nicely. So that would be my proposal, that let us deal with that. Socialism, that belongs to the Communist Party. If at all we want to discuss that, we must find a formula. How do we deal with that issue? But that's another challenge of the country. I wouldn't want to talk about it because nothing is wrong. No, when the friends are not here, I can talk. Not when they are here. I will tell them my headline are serious. with Zuma, attacks, you know. So I would say when it comes to socialism, that's what I would really say. As far as I'm concerned, these questions have been dealt with. You might be wanting to know what to do. I think that's a duty of the youth to say, including this question, what then do we do? And I'm saying, and this is not very far. The youth must, at the moment, the youth is busy. It's busy. Abanye busy conference. Abanye is busy conference. Fine. What do we say in a meeting as our Congolos to correct this, if there are problems? Okay? That's what I would suggest we need to do. Let us go there with a clear presentation from the ANC Youth League, including the program of action that you are going to adopt. That must be supported by the mother body. That would be my proposal. Ubani uzophendula iscience. Andikaphenduli mina sengikuphendulile. Sorry. But I can't hear. Amanda! Away! Amanda! Away! Arona! Mata! Oh, in there, Bethela ese ambayo. Oh, in there, Bethela ese ambayo. Oh, in there, Bethela ese ambayo. Oh, in there, Bethela ese ambayo.
Baba